Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Eichhoff, and I serve as the Director of Alumni Operations at John Carroll University. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening's installment of A.C.E.S, the Alumni Continuing Education Series. A.C.E.S was established in the spring of 2013 by the Office of Alumni Relations in the spirit of lifelong learning. The program offers enrichment opportunities for alumni and friends through the expertise of members of our JCU administration, faculty, and our alumni community. Over the past 2 years, we've heard from experts on ethics and leadership, the political and economic impact of COVID-19, racial equity and social justice, disruptive technology, neurodevelopment, and communication and marketing, just to name a few. Tonight, we will explore K-12 education and the role it plays in our communities. The program is part of a 3-part series entitled Conversations in K-12 Education. Before I introduce our moderator for the evening, I wanted to share a couple housekeeping items with you. First, we encourage you to view the program in full screen mode. Additionally, please ensure that you stay muted throughout the duration of the program. Following the moderated discussion, you will have an opportunity to ask questions using the chat feature. I will curate those and pass them along to our moderator. Also, please note that this program is being recorded, and we will send a recording out to you so you can view it and share it as widely as you wish. It is now my honor to introduce our moderator for tonight, Lisa Schoaf. Lisa is the Associate Dean of Professional Studies at John Carroll University and coordinator of the Educational Leadership Program. She is in her 20th year at John Carroll and has taught courses in teacher education and school administration. Lisa also has a K-12 experience as a building principal and teacher. She has served as a trainer for the Ohio Teacher and Ohio Principal Evaluation System. Lisa, thank you so much for helping organize this wonderful panel tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And we are fortunate to have 4 panelists with us this evening. As you saw, many of them are alums from John Carroll University, and they're all strong leaders in their schools and districts. I would like to introduce our panelists to you in alphabetical order. The first is Dr. Michael Barnes. Dr. Barnes is superintendent of Mayfield City Schools, where he began his career in education as a social studies teacher. He advanced his 3 decades-long career in education as the Mayfield Athletic Director, Director of Human Resources, and Assistant Superintendent. He served Lakewood City Schools as superintendent for 3 years and returned to Mayfield as superintendent this past July. Dr. Barnes is an adjunct professor in the School of Law at Ursuline College and program development at Cleveland State University. He has actively served in multiple strategic planning projects, including the Wildcat Park Project, Mayfield Innovation Center, project-based learning, and STEAM education and community partnerships. He is an active leader in the School Superintendents Association, Buckeye Association of School Administrators, Ohio School Funding, Fair School Funding Group, and Army War College National Security participant. He earned his doctorate from Nova Southeastern University, master's degree from Cleveland State University, and undergraduate degree from Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, where he serves as vice president of the Edinburgh Alumni Board of Directors and is a proud honoree of the Edinburgh University Athletic Hall of Fame. Our second, you want to wave, Mike? And our second panelist is Ms. Lanny Frecker-Davis. Lanny Davis is the president and CEO of Julie Billiard Schools, a network of private Catholic K-8 schools that serve children with learning differences. With campuses in Lyndhurst, Akron, and Westlake, Lanny's vision to serve more than 700 students with unique academic and social learning needs throughout Northeast Ohio is quickly becoming a reality. Lanny earned a Bachelor of Science degree in education from the University of Dayton and a master's degree in educational administration from John Carroll. She is a member of the School Choice Ohio Board of Directors, serves as an advisor to the Thrive program at Notre Dame College, and is a member of Young Presidents Organization, the global leadership of chief executives. In addition, she is a member of numerous grant committees and works closely with legislatures to advocate on behalf of children who have special learning needs. As an associate to the Sisters of Notre Dame, Lanny strives to live out the charism and mission of the school's founders and patroness, St. Julie Billiart. There's Lanny. Our next panelist is Mrs. Maggie Nedwicki, Lakewood City School Superintendent. Maggie Nedwicki has over 28 years of experience in education. She ascended to her superintendent position in July 2021 after having served as Lakewood's assistant superintendent of the Lakewood City Schools for 3 years. She has led the District Innovation Task Force, as well as the development of the district's vision of a Lakewood graduate. Nedwicki also helped expand STEM opportunities in the district through the use of makerspace classrooms and Project Lead the Way. Additionally, she headed the district's Continuous Improvement Committee. Prior to joining the Lakewood schools, Mrs. Nedwicki served in many roles, including Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Director of Race to the Top with the Ohio Department of Education, and as an elementary school principal. She spent the first 11 years of her career as an elementary teacher. Mrs. Nedwicki earned a bachelor's degree in elementary education and administrative licensure from John Carroll University, a master's degree in curriculum and instruction from Cleveland State University, and her superintendent licensure from Ashland University. Wave. And then our last panel, the last panelist joining us this evening is Mr. Brian Sinchuck. Brian Sinchuck serves as president of Lakewood Catholic Academy, a regional elementary school serving approximately 650 students from 6 weeks old through 8th grade. Brian is a frequent presenter at state and national conferences, including a regional TEDx conference, and is passionate about educational innovation and service learning. He has organized student and teacher volunteer experiences in in Ecuador, Nicaragua, Kenya, India, and China. His leadership in education has earned recognition by the National Catholic Education Association, where he served on the advisory committee for marketing and communications and has authored for the organization's magazine, Momentum. Brian's administrative leadership has led Lakewood Catholic Academy to be recognized as an International Baccalaureate World School, a U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon School, a School of Innovation by Today's Catholic Teacher magazine, and identified as one of the top workplaces in Northeast Ohio by the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Brian received his undergraduate and graduate degrees from John Carroll University and has completed additional graduate work at the University of Notre Dame, as well as the Diversity and Inclusion Program at Cornell University. Thank you, Brian. And thank you to all the panelists for joining us this evening. Our program will be organized in some pre-selected questions and answers from our moderators. And then toward the end of the program, we will open it up to questions in the chat and we'll allow the panelists to answer those as well. To begin with, I'm asking the panelists, please describe your leadership role and the skills you feel are important in your position. And we could begin in the order in which I introduced you. So why don't we start with Dr. Barnes?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, good evening, everyone. So nice to be with you, be able to spend some time with you. I want to preface by saying, certainly we don't have all the answers, but we do our very, very best to make a difference and an impact on the lives of children every day and support our amazing staff and their quest to do so. As it relates to leadership style, I think it's important for leaders to assist the organization in determining what its strategic priorities are. And I think the skill sets necessary in order to do that is you have to be an active listener. You have to invite two-way conversations between you and your stakeholder groups. I think you have to be an effective communicator as well. I think from that interaction, what you're able to do is, after identifying those strategic priorities, then it's incumbent upon the leader to then identify the resources, be it human or monetary, that would assist the organization in meeting those strategic priorities and make sure that they're aligned. So I think that would be probably the most critical and important role of the leader, is to help the organization determine its strategic priorities and then exhaust all the communication means possible. And certainly that's two-way, to be able to engage with your stakeholder groups to realize that those priorities.
Thank you. And Lanny, would you like to weigh in next?
Thank you. We didn't get to see what everyone else got to say, so I'm going to second what Dr. Barnes just said. So much actually what I had really thought about was the active listening that is needed these days. We are in a unique situation where we're growing as an organization. So I've had the great honor of working with the staff to launch 2 additional campuses, and launching a school during a pandemic is challenging. I probably wouldn't recommend it to this group as you're embarking on your leadership journey, but it sure is had its challenges, and also like what an amazing thing to be able to do together and to unite together. And so growth is hard. Educators don't always love change. I think educators have had to get a little bit more comfortable in that weird space because of COVID. We've had to learn to pivot quickly. We've kind of had to unite. And now as the political climate is changing, we are seeing different skills needed. And I'd say that the number one thing that a leader can bring to the table these days is to listen and then activate on what you're hearing. So it's not just about listening and appeasing people. It's about putting in a strategic vision or a really more global perspective of what you need to do next, and do the next right thing for your organization.
Thank you, Lanny. Maggie?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. It's kind of nice to be inside because it's so cold outside. So we get to stay at our homes. Great points, Dr. Barnes, Lanny, absolutely. And I'll just take that one step further, that whole ability to be okay with feedback. I think after a while that comes, as you continue in your leadership roles, as even, as the classroom teacher, and then move on to a building leadership role, central office role. But, you can't wear everything. And so the biggest thing for me, and the weight off of my shoulders, is when I started to really, and again, go back to what Dr. Barnes and Lanny said, is listen to people, because there always is something there. Even when somebody's so angry and upset, there's always something there that you can do better. And as an organization, with so many stakeholders, we don't know it all the time. And so once you give yourself some permission to be a good listener and to really dig through that feedback that you're receiving, even though it might not be coming across as friendly as you wish it would, then after that, there's always something you can improve on.
Thank you, Maggie. And Brian?
It's hard to follow all of that up, but it is a joy to be with everyone this evening. And before I share a quick thought, I want to thank Dr. Schoaf, who was one of my professors. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this, a great leader herself. I also want to give a quick shout out to another educational leader on this call. I see Molly Toussaint is on the call in the Zoom, and another great educational leader in our Cleveland community. And last but certainly not least, everything I learned about leadership, I learned from Barbara Schubert, one of the champions of John Carroll University, who I also see is on this call. So Barbara, hello to you. I sure do miss you. Thank you for all that you do for John Carroll University. It's a joy to be with you and the other panelists this evening. I would only add, it's funny, all of those things were topics that I would have shared. I would just add as a last thought, that I think one of the things that I discovered was leadership takes a great deal of courage. in addition to that listening and the clear communication, facilitating change and remaining committed to a vision requires a whole lot of courage. And sometimes we have to reach into the depths of our soul to find that courage. I think these past years may have taught us some of those lessons, but I would just like to add that I think that's an important role to play, and not dismissing the fears and the uncertainties, but in leading a staff, especially during uncertain and challenging times. I think being an authentic and vulnerable leader demands that we exercise a great deal of courage.
Thank you so much, and great points. Moving forward, there'll be different leads on the questions, and panelists are, like I said, invited to answer, and we'll have a little more movement with our format. The next question is, COVID affected every school district. Masking in schools is a polarizing topic. There wasn't any training or preparation to manage a pandemic. What leadership approach did you take during this time? Lanny, how about if you lead off?
Thanks, Dr. Schoaf. As many of you already said, there was no right answers during that time. And I think you had to really accept that at face value. There's no right answers. We're going to do what we can with what we have. So we really employed a process for navigating problems and solving these issues. So we really established a response team, like many other people. We quickly established our goals, and we talked about what were our priorities and our values as a core group for the organization. And we did talk to people throughout the organization, but we knew as the core leaders what were kind of our non-negotiables and what we really wanted to do. And then we had to remember that problem solving is really an iterative process. You evolve, you try, and then you pivot. So nothing was going to be perfect. And I said that over and over. We first understood the situation as best we could with the information we had. Then we developed options. Then we predicted the outcomes based on which options. Then we chose our best course of action and we executed. And every time we went back and repeated those same things. Are our goals the same? Are our priorities the same? And did those options work? And are there different options we haven't thought of? And we continued to do that. I tried to be realistic, yet optimistic, which is a hard balance during a pandemic. I tried to be transparent, but still hopeful. When it's bleak, you really have to use relationships and trust and honesty with your people. They really appreciate those things. Naturally, people won't stay and buy in if you don't acknowledge the hard things. But in contrast, they'll lose faith in you quickly if it's all doom and gloom, right? All the time. So we really tried to be transparent. We addressed things head on. We used what we know and what historically we know. We said, we'll get through this, and we provide logical hope for that. We will get through this because we've been through X, Y, and Z, and we learned and we pivoted and we came through. And I think people really appreciated that. And to tie back in, question number one, it was very much a listening, a learning, acknowledging that everyone came from a place of wanting to be heard. People were scared. And I think that you could operate from a place of fear, or you could operate from a place of love. And we tried to operate from a place of love and strength and doing what we knew we needed to do, which is try to keep kids in the schools learning, especially for our population, that was critical, and keep our staff safe, and do what we set out to do prior to the pandemic.
Would any other panelists like to share about the leadership approach you take during this time?
I think Lanny did an amazing job explaining that. I would only add one piece that I found necessary in my role, and Lanny may be able to relate because we both work in faith-based organizations. I think part of the shift for me in my leadership style was that my communication became far more emotional than it had ever been before. So crafting communications that acknowledged the things that Lanny identified, the ideas of great fear, of great uncertainty, and acknowledging, I mean, I can't remember the last time I issued a school communication where I said, we don't have all the answers. And it was just acknowledging so much uncertainty validated our work, and I think was transparent and authentic. And I think it taught me a great deal and certainly helped my leadership style evolve. I also hung on to that great phrase of Maya Angelou, when you know better, do better. So as we received more and more information, we tried to do better, right? And I think because we articulated that to our school stakeholders, folks had a great deal of faith in the work that we were doing, and it seems as though we thrived during a very difficult time.
Mrs. Nedwicki, I would yield to you if you have anything.
You're so good to me, Michael J. Barnes. You know what? I think each of you did a great job explaining that. I called the last few years the Etch-a-Sketch years. It was every time, and communication was so important, but every time we sat, you know, as you both described, and really tried to work out a good communication that was bright and sent hope, but at the same time gave enough information to support the teachers and the administrators who are working from home and remotely working with students. And so provide some of that learning for them or tools for them. And then the state changed something. And so we shook our pate, we just you shake it and start over again. And so I agree. It's that opportunity. It has really taught me that pivoting is not a problem. And if there's something that's not right, stop for a minute, slow down. Everything doesn't have to be so fast. And in education, we're constantly managing multiple topics and problems and solutions at once that just slow down, you know, take a breath, ask people around you, and then start back up again.
If I might briefly add, I agree with my colleagues. You know, school leaders are community builders, and this has certainly been a stress and strain. I think the importance of leaning in and having empathy for where everyone is on the topic of masks is very, very important. I think trying to be nimble and flexible because there was the need to adjust constantly to different terms and conditions as it relates to COVID-19. As Laney said, our non-negotiable is best as we could preserve was to keep our school open, and keep our students learning with our amazing staff. One of them is actually on the call right now, Mrs. Nikki Rucci Makata, the finest educator you find on this side of the Mason-Dixon, anyway. But keeping our kids with our staff, knowing how important those relationships are, is a non-negotiable for us. And so we've been able to pivot and adjust to preserve that priority.
Thank you. Our next question is, schools across the country are facing challenges to include online learning, in-person learning, a combination, et cetera. What leadership skills are needed to manage these demands? And I thought, Maggie, if you would be willing to lead.
Sure, but since there's been these shout outs, I can't, you know, start without saying Casey Squires, a fabulous coordinator at Lakewood City Schools, is on today. Good to see you, Casey. You know what? The last few years and prior to COVID, education has been under, or it is an era of hyper change, just the entire world around us. And so leaders, teachers, students, everybody is dealing with so much all the time. It's a constant barrage of new research, new tools, a new app for that. and trying to keep up with all of that. It's difficult. And so, and if I think about it for a little bit, leaders in my mind need to have a few skills. You have a lot of tools, but some of the important ones are, and some of it's been mentioned already, the ability to communicate a compelling vision. Visions need to be compelling, aspirational, and a challenge. People want to follow something exciting that has a little meat to it, but also to get them to a better point. So you need to be able to share what that vision is going to be and why they would like to be part of the solutions. Ability to lead authentically, be yourself. So many people, I've been around such amazing professionals, but if I try to be them, I'm not authentic, and then my behaviors will change. People need to see that you're consistent in your behaviors, and that builds trust. Doesn't mean I am perfect. I wish I was somebody else sometimes or had the right words to say, but being authentic is so important to yourself and to the people around you. It builds capacity for understanding that it's okay not to, again, have all the answers. And again, embrace, your own vulnerability. Be reflective. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay not to have the answer right then. Dr. Barnes and I work together, and so often, he would bring up that, somebody in his life once told him, you don't have to have the answer right then. And that rings in my head often when I'm working, because stepping away from things, being reflective, and being a deep listener is so important.
Is there pressure to be technologically advanced?
I would say yes. We learned that in the first go around in March of 2020. Many of us weren't prepared with respect to technology to respond to meeting the learning demands of an immediate shutdown. So I think, yes, there needs to be some planning. There needs to be some forward thinking around technology with respect to how it supports learning. And I think as an education community, we've all evolved and we've all arrived at a better place today than we were. But I think just thinking back to 2020 and the notion of school looking different, meaning not being face-to-face with children and not interacting, that was the norm. That was what we grew to expect. That's what all of us learned in our teacher prep programs, the importance of relationships. And I think that was disrupted. And we learned a lot. And we call them COVID keepers. There's some COVID keepers that we've discovered through this, and the power of technology as a tool to maintain a level of connectedness between adults and adults, students and students, and adults and students is something that we will definitely hold on to as an education community.
And Dr. Schoaf, if I could just add to that, Mike, I think that's a brilliant insight. I love that phrase, COVID keepers. I would say, in addition to understanding and valuing the importance of technology, one of the things that we also discovered, so it's not an either or, certainly our schools have to be technologically advanced and we have to seek out that innovation. But one of the other realizations that we came to more fully appreciate is our commitment to social emotional learning and the soft skill development of our students. So many of our students do naturally well in the technology areas, but lack those interpersonal skills that we are now intentionally designing curriculum around and experiences. So at my school, particularly at Lakewood Catholic Academy, we have competitions in interpersonal skills. We call it the Great Lake Shake competition. So how do students shake a hand, make good eye contact, have conversation, those soft skills that are so necessary for success in college or in career. We're putting more value into that than we did realize we needed even before.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. Additionally, people are challenging teachers, whether critical race theory is being taught and other curriculum issues, as well as instructional strategies. How do you lead a district through divisive opinions to meet the needs of the students you serve? And Brian, can you take the lead on this one?
Sure. And I think one of the things that I have to quickly acknowledge is that my friends Maggie and Mike have a far more difficult task in this area than Lanny and I do. Lanny and I, working in a private faith-based school, have a commitment to certain principles, and it is an option to be part of our community. So while we may engage in compassionate listening, while we may engage in that feedback cycle and work with our families to understand their needs and to articulate the reasons for our policies, ultimately, there are times when we have to share with a family, if your principles don't match ours, you have the right to educate your children somewhere else. Again, my friends Maggie and Mike have a much more difficult challenge in working in the public arena. I will say that even in our private world, education world, we have to face those same conversations. It's just slightly different. And I think we still engage in that compassionate listening. I heard us earlier talk about active listening. One of the things that I have found is that this pandemic has forced us to go beyond just active listening, but to really engage in compassionate, empathetic listening, to really understand the reasoning behind people's sometimes anger, frustration, and to steal a phrase from St. Ignatius of Loyola, assuming that positive intent, right? That the folks who may be attacking us for a certain policy or procedural protocol that we put in place are doing so out of a real sincere place. I can tell you I've struggled with that, but I do try to keep that as a North Star to say, what's behind the anger, what's behind the frustration. And when we can listen with compassion, we can move ourselves and our organizations forward in a more positive way. I think once a direction is decided, be it on all these controversial topics, a clear communication plan is so necessary. Clear communication with understanding and authenticity in the writing of that communication is so important. And then the toughest part is being committed courageously to making sure that communication is executed, right? Because no matter what we decide on some of these hot topic issues, once decided, and if the information we have based our decision on doesn't change, we need to be courageously committed to following through with the policies that we have put in place. I think the combination of those three steps of that compassionate listening, that clear communication, and that courageous commitment to the vision and to the plan that was outlined really helps to move organizations forward and through difficult times. I will add just one last practical thing that I began to do, partially from my speech and debate background. I don't know why it hit me, but when we started to develop these communications that we knew were going to get negative feedback, because what communication isn't getting negative feedback these days? What my team and I decided to do was we would craft the response prior to actually receiving the negative email. And not that we would send out stock responses, but what it did help us to do is to answer the debated point without emotion and without considering who was sending the negative message to us. And that was a game changer in our leadership here at Lakewood Catholic Academy. And I can't recommend it enough. And in good debate, you prep your case, but you also prep the rebuttal case before you engage in the debate. And so I think that has been super helpful to us as we navigated some of these hot topics.
And if I could just add, you are so right, Brian, we have it way easier than Maggie and Dr. Barnes. However, I will say that sometimes when people are paying for their tuition, they also feel extra entitled to tell you maybe what they would advise you to do in your role. And some people did take the last 2 years and they felt that they were maybe like COVID conquerors, where they've done so much research that they have made themselves an expert. An expert is a very loose term that kind of came from maybe their Facebook feed, or, we saw it everywhere. So I think part of that was just trying to acknowledge that it's okay and bring it down a level and learn to laugh at the hard things, as a team, support one another. One of the things that we did, which we have the great ability to do this, is we created a parent conduct form as well as a student conduct form. And really, I worked with our legal team to make sure it was incredibly supportive of what we promised to do for our parents, what we promised to do when we embark on a tough situation with your child. We will listen to you, you will be part of the team. We kind of laid out what we value as an organization and how we would uphold that through action. And then we had the parents sign off that they would uphold their part, which is to not come right to the administrator, to go to the teachers who are amazing, who always have reason to do what they do. And sometimes just communicating with them, you're going to learn a whole heck of a lot. Start there. Start with respect for them, because they work so many tireless hours and they're, oftentimes not treated like the professionals that they are. So we really lined all of that up. And now at any acceptance meeting, we do go over that with the parents. And it has helped just from we're going to be really transparent about what we will give you and what we expect from you in return.
I have to agree. Clear communication, being well planned, as Brian shared, trying to get ahead of the questions. Interesting enough, the entire social media world, it's amazing how something can just take off. And then because you're working every day, you're not realizing what buzzwords might be bothering people or tied into part of what people believe might be critical race theory. And so having, bulleted statements for your board to speak about, for your building principals to talk off of, for your teachers if they need them. So often, if it happens to come to a board meeting, to be able to communicate clearly what we are doing and what we're not. We still may disagree. Interesting enough, I was home one day and I turned on the news and it was like the greatest aha, maybe I need to stay home more often. But all of a sudden they had a teacher on there and she said, yes, we are teaching critical race theory. I was like, no, you're not teaching. And then there was somebody else on there. This is what K-12 schools are doing. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I was home listening to this, I wouldn't know if I wasn't an educator within my organization to know we're not teaching that at the K-12 level. And so it's difficult to combat when people are hearing negative information or information that is incorrect throughout the United States. And then on top of it, every state has different curriculums to them. So then it is not, equal conversations to be had. But I think clear communication, know what you want to communicate, know what you are doing and what you're not. And if you don't know what you're doing, figure it out.
And I would just briefly add, and I agree with everything my colleagues already mentioned, but also just creating collaborative structures and opportunities for two-way communication with your stakeholder groups. So those things can be talked through in person with intentionality versus being played out perhaps in social media. And I think in the midst of the storm, it's important to find your anchor. And for me, the anchor is identifying those things that we do agree on. And because that becomes your shared vision. And that's what rallies a community and keeps it together more so than some of the disruptions that can be our reality at times.
You've all talked a lot about the qualities and recommendations for leaders, how do you think we prepare future school leaders for these challenges? What should be part of their preparation? Either through universities or the mentoring, what do you think is important? Maggie, will you lead on this one?
Sure. I think one of the greatest courses or opportunities, future leaders, which we need future leaders. We need future courageous leaders. But what we need, when you're being able to be around other people and to necessarily just be close to other effective leaders, that's where you learn the most. So if our preparation programs can put in more time for authentic learning, I think that's when I know for myself as a leader, I learn most from just walking around with somebody and watching everything they did, and then going someplace else to somebody else that was different, and not always matching yourself up with somebody that's just like you. I've learned so many lessons around others that have a different style as I do, but as I grew through education as a teacher leader and as an assistant principal, curriculum director, I started to seek out other individuals that I necessarily didn't always understand, but wanted to understand because they were really effective in the building they were in or the position they were in. So allow yourself to be open to other strategies and ideas and thought processes and philosophies. And I think you'll continue to grow yourself as an educational leader.
Other suggestions for preparing future school leaders? How to prepare?
I think an effective method is case studies. Being real life case studies through guided practice, really getting involved in the problem solving and thinking about the thinking. Because theory and what we perceive to be practice may not necessarily be so, but having access to true, authentic, real life examples, and then being a part of a brainstorm of how you would respond to that and thinking about your own thinking with guided help, I think is a really, really an effective approach to growing leadership skills.
I love those suggestions. I would add, from a very practical perspective, I think for me, one of the things that would have been helpful in my training was a little bit more work in human resources and crisis communication or crisis management. I say that because I think so often these things find their way to our offices, and then they absorb so much of our time that our focus on teaching and learning suffers because of it. So if we can more effectively handle and be prepared in areas of HR, not that we would be experts in these areas. Obviously, we have to leverage our external resources when major issues come our way. But some, general background in human resources work, as well as crisis communication, maybe that happens in the public realm, but I can assure you that in private Catholic elementary education, that is not a common skill set found in school leaders or in our preparation programs. And then lastly, I think facilitating change and talking through the change process is really at the heart of what we do as leaders, right? We may listen in these wonderfully active and compassionate ways and solicit great feedback. Ultimately, a vision will be shaped, and that vision will likely mandate that people change their behaviors and their actions. And how to be an effective leader of change, I think, is so critically important as we prepare future leaders.
At this time, I'm going to move into some of the questions posed in the chat. I don't know if I can get to them all, but I'll start with them. Lanny, someone did say, hey, can you share that parent code of conduct? Parent code of conduct. Maybe you could provide it, it's hard to share that per se, but is there any suggestions on how to prepare that or resources that you could refer our participants to?
Thank you for asking. I'd be happy to share maybe more often a one-off kind of situation, but I do, we did work with our legal team. I'm clear is kind. So we tried to be as clear as possible as to who we are and what we can do and kind of the breadth and depth of our resources. And then, we really tried to make it short and sweet and really palatable for, parents and what they had time for. So it's a one-pager. We put it kind of in draft form and then had our legal team look over it to just make sure. And it has been an effective tool just to even have some of those more radical conversations that are needed to be had at the onset of tough things. And please remember, we're working with only students who have, identified special learning needs. So all of them, have an IEP and we're responsible for services. And so sometimes you can predict some of the tough conversations that are going to be happening when it comes to the type of work that we are in.
Another question was, how are you tackling teacher burnout under the, these challenges and difficulty? And maybe it's not burnout or mental stress, things like that.
Yeah, I think this is difficult. I can't say we've mastered it. I think we're just trying to do as much as we can. So this year we kicked off our year at Lakewood as a year of appreciation. And it wasn't just for our teachers, it was for administrators. It was a year of appreciation for our families, our students, all staff. Everyone, COVID affected everyone personally at your home, your extended family, and then it affected all of our jobs. And that was the same for our families and our students. And so it was this year we named the year of appreciation. And every month we try to do something a little different. Sometimes it's a video with kids and adults saying what they appreciate. That's how we kicked it off at the beginning of the year, doing little things. There is not enough time and not enough money to give people to really get them to the point that I think they would feel better. There just isn't. And so it's just continuing to remind, being that positive force. We can get through this together. If you need assistance, reach out to us. But each month we try to do a little something different, drop cookies off at the school buildings or write, notes. And we have some things coming up in the next couple of months, just to show some appreciation.
I think this is a great question, and I totally agree with you, Maggie. We have, really seen that from a kind of global perspective, we can support this through an employee assistance program. So we've done things to really help with the mental health side of things that we know everyone needs right now. This is not specific to teachers. But the other thing that I think really changed during the pandemic is I saw that everyone learned how to work remotely. So we started to work anywhere, which meant we worked everywhere. And we worked all the time and we were so accessible and our teachers were amazing. And one of them is on the call in the spirit of shout outs, but Alyssa Spalik is on the call right now and she's learning to be a future leader. And I think she'll be fantastic, but she went through even being really accessible to parents, but then also getting this unique position of seeing what the home life for these kids really looked like. And then how she could then kind of use it to meet that child's needs differently. And I think that was critical, but then what we had to do when we kind of got back in person and we realigned was our teachers had been working everywhere all the time and being so responsive that now you have to support them on the other side, which is they have 24 hours to respond to an email. Everything is not on fire all the time. They need to be with their families. They need to be present. So really supporting them from a, now it is 4 o'clock, go home, your work will be here in the morning, go be present to your family. And I think that came from really us as an organization saying what is important to us. And it's that we didn't want our staff burning out. They are too critically important to us. And knowing that just because you can have access doesn't mean that we should be accessing teachers all the time. And I think that's something that our teachers probably really do appreciate about our administrators here at Julie Billiart Schools, is that flexibility, that home component, that, oh, your child's in a performance, or, oh, your sister's pregnant. Yeah, go do your thing. We can do that being a smaller organization that can be super flexible. And people appreciate that. And then they know that you're human too, and that it's okay. And a lot of these things that we've deemed to be really important are not urgent and critical all kind of at the same time.
Yeah, I echo that. If I had my magic wand, I'd give them all a week off, but I don't. Giving them permission, giving our staff permission to unplug is really important. Beginning the month of February, we're going to engage in a staff appreciation campaign for the second semester. This is tough, and they are tired. You see it on their faces when I'm in the buildings and visiting with staff, because they've done the bulk of the heavy lifting through all of this, and it's just haven't been an opportunity to just separate and disconnect and catch your breath. Yeah, we've had breaks here, but still, even over the breaks, you're worried about loved ones, people being sick, and other challenges personally, professionally, et cetera. I'm hoping that this campaign beginning in February for the balance of the year, centered on creating themes around staff appreciation, will be something that can lift the spirits of our staff, because they are tired and worn down. But that said, they're fighting the good fight every day. They're showing up and they're competing every single day and taking care of kids. I couldn't be more proud, to be honest with you.
I feel the same way, Mike. My team here at LCA is simply extraordinary. And we're also blessed, again, because of the nature and structure of our school, to have an incredibly supportive parent community that has always appreciated our teachers and our administrative staff. So they've really gone above and beyond in expressing their appreciation. And then I work with an amazing board of directors. And as a private school, we've spent a lot of money on food and alcohol, to be honest. Full disclosure and transparency, and all joking aside, the strength that keeps our teachers together is their connectedness to each other. They are obviously individually committed to the school's mission, but what helps them the most is when they feel a connection to each other. So as a staff and as a board of directors, we've created experiences throughout the year for them to connect with one another again, be that through a happy hour or through a yoga experience that a family created for our staff, from outings at Top Golf to experiences at the zoo together. That's what has helped them through these difficult days. And then last, I'd like to share a thought that somebody important to us at LCA recently told me. The person said, you can't let the wins get to your head and you can't get the losses to your heart. And I think that's a good reminder to us as leaders, but also as teachers in the classroom leading their little school community, that we have these amazing wins. We see children grow and develop and have wonderful academic successes. We can't let that get to our head too often, but we also can't allow the difficult days to get to our hearts. And so we can go home to our families and be truly present to them, as Lanny said earlier.
Ryan, I'm right down the street. You can invite me sometime.
Maggie, you and I would have a very long happy hour solving all the problems in Lakewood, right?
We have time for about one more question, and I thought this one might be fitting, given our context of the evening. How do you bring communities together during this time of division?
That's a tough one. And I hope that you'll forgive me for talking about the faith component of our school community too often in the presentation, but I think that's been helpful to us as we ground ourselves in the gospel of Jesus Christ, that is the foundation of our Catholic faith here at LCA. I think the more we were able to reinforce the mission of what sort of is the foundation of our school, the easier it is for us to bring diverse communities together and diverse thoughts together, because that's in fact what Jesus did. So Jesus had a very inclusive approach to marginalized communities and differing thought. And so I think as we embrace that in the spirit of our current Pope, Pope Francis, I think that has helped us as a faith-based school.
You know, important to mention, I'm in the second 100 days of my first year back at Mayfield. And so a lot of this time since the beginning of the school year has really been my transition and reacclimation to the community, not to take for granted that I had been there for 21 years prior. I'm in a different role now. And so as a part of the strategy in my transition and reacclimation plan, we have really intentionally created community engagement forums, coffee talks, listen and learns, and even done so at the building levels. And I've been pleased to see the community participation in that. And I think that's a gesture that we will continue, because what it does is it welcomes diverse opinions and thoughts as it relates to what we want to realize for every student in our district by the time they leave Mayfield High School. And our mission is every student, every day. And so our goal through this discovery process is to figure out how we operationalize that into a shared and common vision. And in doing so, we're bringing the community together. And I say community, I have a superintendent students advisory group. I have 2 parent support groups thus far that we've been meeting with just to talk in global terms. We're meeting with the admin team and certainly our staff as well. And so I think that that's an opportunity to bring community, and I'm talking in a broader sense, not just a school or just school personnel, but a broader sense. This has created an opportunity to bring community together, and we'll continue that.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Barnes, doing the same as listen and learns, as we call them in the community or at the building level. And then also offering different groups of people time to come in, or when there are so many, I feel as if there were times that I potentially could have moved a phone call to maybe the assistant superintendent. I engaged the person instead. And so I've spent a lot of time this year listening to people on the phone or inviting people to come in, and they're very appreciative of that. And I know any one of us would have done it, but just to allow for that at this point in time, because there's so many various opinions and thoughts out there right now, that it's just time to sit back and listen. And I don't want to forget David Clifford. I'm so sorry I missed you on this call. So, but I had to get that in. But I think it's just, you know what, you're going all out as a leader. You're just trying to, engage as many, not just community, but stakeholders within your community through conversations, but really not your agenda, listening to the thoughts and possibly opportunities for growth for yourself and your organization. And so I think open yourself up to spend a little more time just being one-on-one or in small groups is really important.
I want to thank all of our panelists, Mike, Lanny, Maggie, and Brian, for your time this evening to address some of the challenges during the pandemic and other issues related to leadership, and for your great suggestions and willingness to receive questions and participate in the panel. So thank you so much for your time this evening. We wish you I don't know, peace, and we wish you continued growth as you develop in your leadership role this year. And we appreciate your service to our schools, to our districts, and the broader community. So thank you very much. And thank you again for participating.
Well, everyone, again, I want to say thank you to our incredible panel. And again, Dr. Schoaf, thank you for helping lead this wonderful program. I did want to take a quick moment to highlight our other two aspects of the Conversations in K-12 Education series later this semester. On February 23rd, Dr. Peggy Schauer, Assistant Professor of Secondary Education, will host Zooming Through Crisis, the impact of the pandemic on our K-12 classrooms. The program will feature 4 outstanding teachers who will address the following questions. What is the role of technology in a post-pandemic classroom? Is learning loss real? What lessons were learned that can help us navigate a new normal in our K-12 schools? And on Thursday, March 17th, Dr. Andrew Tagliata, School Counseling Program Coordinator, will host school counseling challenges and needs during the pandemic. This panel discussion will focus on the impact that the pandemic has had on school counselors and their work with students, parents and guardians, and school professionals. The panel, consisting of 4 school counselors from the greater Cleveland area, will discuss the changing needs of students and what school counselors should be prepared for in the future, the challenge they have faced, and how they will have handled the current challenges. You can find out more information and register for all of our upcoming programs, including our Alumni Author Series, Scholarly Lunches, our A.C.E.S programs, and our Alumni Spotlight at jcu.edu/alumni. Additionally, we invite you to view recordings of our previous programs on the John Carroll University Alumni Association YouTube channel. To view our extensive library, search John Carroll University Alumni on YouTube. And finally, please consider a charitable gift to John Carroll in support of our outstanding students, our wonderful faculty, and our entire campus community. If you've already made a gift this year, thank you for your generosity. And if you have not, please join me in supporting John Carroll so we can continue to deliver an outstanding education for our current and future Blue Streaks. To make a donation, please visit jcu.edu/give. Thank you again for joining us this evening. Take care, be well, stay safe and healthy, and onward on John Carroll.